Why is solitude the ultimate test of your life? Think about it carefully. Most of the goals we chase, success, wealth, recognition, the approval of others, are celebrated as the true measures of strength. But what if none of these are the real exam? What if the moment that truly defines you is the one most people try desperately to avoid? The moment when you are left completely alone with yourself? In that silence, there are no distractions to hide behind, no applause to keep you inflated, no conversation to drown out your doubts, just you and the raw truth of who you are. That's why solitude is terrifying, because it acts as a merciless mirror. It strips away the masks you wear every day, it unmasks the lies you tell yourself, and it refuses every excuse you try to make. And yet, here lies the paradox. The very silence you fear, the emptiness you escape from, is the doorway to your greatest freedom. Alone, without noise, your mind begins to awaken. Alone, you learn whether your dreams are truly yours or borrowed from the expectations of others. Alone, you find the line between what you pretend to be and who you really are. This is why solitude is not just uncomfortable, it is decisive. It is not a flaw, nor a punishment. It is the ultimate test. And if you can pass it, if you can endure its weight and walk through its fire, you come out the other side transformed, stronger, clearer, unshakable. Stay with me through this journey, and you'll begin to see solitude not as an enemy, but as the most powerful ally you will ever have. Because once you make peace with being alone, no rejection can break you, no silence can frighten you, and no force in the world can take away your freedom. Solitude has often been described as a cruel mirror, and for good reason. When you are alone, truly alone, all the distractions fall away. There are no roles to play, no stage to perform on, and no one to applaud your act. In the quiet, you are stripped bare. What remains is not the image you project to the world, but the person you actually are. That's why solitude can feel unbearable. It confronts you with truths you'd rather keep hidden. It whispers back the questions you've been avoiding. It brings into focus the weaknesses you've tried to cover, and it forces you to acknowledge the weight of your own unfinished battles. Alone, there is no escape from yourself. This is why so many people run from silence. They fill their lives with noise, movement, and company, anything to avoid facing the reflection that solitude presents. But running only delays the inevitable, because sooner or later, the masks slip. Sooner or later, the distractions fade. And what's left is that unflinching mirror staring back at you, asking, "Who are you really?" when no one is watching. It is tempting to see solitude as an enemy, as a kind of punishment. But the truth is, solitude is a test, and like all tests, it has a purpose. Its role is not to destroy you, but to strip away the falsehoods so that you can meet yourself honestly. Yes, it can feel harsh, like standing before a judge who refuses to believe your excuses. But that same harshness is also its gift. Solitude refuses lies. It refuses illusions. And in doing so, it opens the possibility for authenticity. The mirror of solitude is not kind. It is not forgiving. But if you can endure its gaze, you will discover something extraordinary, the freedom that comes only from living without masks. Here is the great irony. The silence we fear most is the same silence that can set us free. Most people believe solitude is emptiness, a void that threatens to swallow them. But when you stay long enough in its presence, you begin to notice that solitude is not empty at all. It is full of clarity, full of hidden strength, full of truths that are drowned out by the constant noise of life. When the voices of others fade, your own voice finally begins to rise. And for perhaps the first time, you can hear yourself clearly. What once felt like weakness becomes the seed of strength. What once appeared as fear transforms into clarity. Alone, you discover that you no longer have to bend under the weight of expectation. You are no longer a prisoner of what people might say. In solitude, you begin to own yourself. This is what Carl Jung hinted at when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. It cannot happen in the constant presence of others. It cannot happen if you are always adapting, always pleasing, always adjusting your shape to fit into the crowd. Individuation requires stepping into silence. It requires the courage to stand alone long enough for your real self to emerge. Of course, this is not easy. At first, solitude feels like an executioner. It brings discomfort, anxiety, even fear. But if you can endure that, something remarkable happens. The silence that once threatened you becomes an ally. It becomes a source of freedom no one can touch, because it comes from within. And this is the promise I want you to hold on to. Solitude is not punishment. It is the passage to your deepest independence. To sit with yourself, unafraid, is to carry within you a strength that no rejection, no criticism, and no loss can ever destroy. Many believe solitude begins when you are physically alone, but that is a convenient illusion. True solitude begins when you realize that even in a crowded room, even surrounded by friends, family, and partners, you can still feel utterly empty inside. This is the moment when the mirage shatters. You discover that the noise of others cannot cure the silence within you. At best, it only disguises it, but the silence remains, waiting, and here lies the danger. Instead of facing this silence, we cling to distractions. We chase constant approval, the smiles, the applause, the likes, the messages, the endless scrolling through glowing screens. These fleeting doses of validation become our borrowed oxygen. We inhale them like addicts, terrified of suffocating if the supply runs dry. But dependence on approval comes at a heavy price. Every time you shape yourself to please, every time you silence your voice to fit in, you mortgage your own identity. Piece by piece, you hand over your freedom to the opinions of others. And the cruelest part? You do it out of fear of the very thing that could set you free. Solitude. You can run from it for a while. You can drown yourself in entertainment, in shallow relationships, in the endless chatter of social noise. But solitude always finds you. Like a shadow, it waits. And if you are not prepared, when it finally catches up, it will break you. Yet the same force that destroys also teaches. Solitude unmasks the imposter. It reveals how many of your dreams were truly yours and how many were borrowed. It shows you how much of your life was built from bricks chosen by others. Painful, yes, but also liberating. Because what solitude strips away, it does so to make room for something greater: authenticity. Solitude is often mistaken for an executioner, a punisher, a force that strips you of comfort and warmth. But those who endure its weight eventually discover its true role. Solitude is the most honest teacher you will ever have. Unlike the crowd, it does not flatter you. Unlike friends or family, it does not bend the truth to protect you. Solitude does not care about your excuses, your image, or your reputation. It deals only in truth. And though this honesty can feel brutal, it is also the very thing that transforms you. The person who learns to sit comfortably in their own company becomes unshakable. They stop fearing rejection. They stop clinging to the approval of others. They no longer enter relationships to fill a void. Instead, they approach others from a place of abundance, offering rather than begging. This shift changes everything. Suddenly, your connections become deeper, more genuine. You no longer look to others to rescue you. You no longer mold yourself to avoid abandonment. Instead, you share who you are, freely and without need. Solitude filters relationships, separating the ones built on dependency from the ones built on creation. Those who cannot bear solitude seek company to numb themselves. But those who have made peace with solitude seek company to grow, to create, to love without chains. And that is the real transformation. Solitude, the teacher, reveals that strength is not found in avoiding loneliness, but in embracing it until it no longer has power over you. And when you emerge from its lessons, You are no longer vulnerable to loss, rejection, or absence. Because what solitude teaches you above all is this: you are enough. And when you truly believe that, the world itself opens differently before your eyes. If solitude were truly a punishment, then why did so many of history's greatest minds seek it deliberately? Why did they withdraw into silence as if it were a sacred temple? Leonardo da Vinci filled his notebooks alone, vanishing for years to study and observe what others could not see. Friedrich Nietzsche walked alone for hours, wearing down the soles of his boots as he wandered through forests in contemplation. Franz Kafka wrote in the still hours of dawn, when the rest of the world slept. These were not eccentric habits. They were acts of survival. For the thinker, the artist, the visionary, solitude was not an enemy, but a necessity. It was the only space where they could hear clearly, unburdened by the voices of the crowd. Solitude gave them access to a depth of thought, a clarity of vision, and a surge of creativity that no ordinary conversation could ever offer. The crowd entertains, but silence transforms. And it is no accident that the men and women who shaped history, who painted masterpieces, who broke old ideas and forged new ones, all passed through this same gate of solitude. And the lesson for us is clear. Solitude is not just for philosophers or artists. It is for anyone who seeks authenticity. Anyone who wants to know what they are truly capable of must at some point step away from the noise of the world and into the stillness of themselves. This is why solitude is not the end of the path, but the beginning of transformation. It is not an absence, but a presence of self, of clarity, of vision. And once you begin to see solitude this way, you understand why the greatest minds treated it not as exile, but as home. Here lies the hardest truth. If you cannot bear solitude, it means you cannot bear your own mind. And that is the real wound. When silence descends, you begin to hear what you've buried. Insecurities whisper, failures resurface, regrets echo, and beneath them all, the fear that perhaps you are not enough. These are the voices we spend our lives trying to drown out with chatter, with entertainment, with company that adds nothing but distraction. But no matter how far you run, they remain. And solitude forces you to face them. That is why so many avoid it. It hurts. It tears away the veil of busyness and reveals what is unresolved inside. Yet, paradoxically, this is also where healing begins. Solitude is a psychological laboratory. It exposes your wounds, but it also holds the antidote. When you stop running and instead observe yourself calmly, you discover something revolutionary. You were never broken, only afraid. Your anxiety was not born from solitude, but from never having met yourself fully. In the stillness, your mind ceases to be a cage and becomes a workshop. You learn to organize your emotions, to polish your thoughts, to reshape your vision of the world. What once felt like a prison becomes a creative space. Imagine this. One morning you wake up and realize you no longer fear being alone. Your own thoughts are no longer a punishment, but a refuge. You no longer cling to toxic friendships or beg for scraps of attention. Instead, you choose with precision who deserves a place in your life. That day, solitude stops being your executioner and becomes your greatest privilege. Think of solitude as a kind of training ground, a gym for the soul. Just as the body grows stronger through resistance, the mind and heart grow stronger through silence. Each moment you sit with yourself without running away is like a repetition, a weight lifted, a muscle forged. At first, the exercises feel painful. The silence feels heavy. The loneliness burns. But with practice, you adapt. You learn to regulate your emotions. You learn to face anxiety instead of fleeing it. You learn to construct an inner dialogue that sustains you instead of sabotaging you. This is the true workout of solitude. Without it, there can be no real introspection. Without it, you repeat the patterns you inherited from others, reacting like a machine programmed by the noise of society. But in solitude, you begin to reprogram yourself. You learn which parts of you are authentic and which parts are simply masks borrowed from others. And there is another gift. Solitude sharpens your senses. In the stillness, details become clear. You perceive hidden intentions in people. You sense falseness in gestures. You see what you used to overlook. Because once you learn to decipher yourself, it becomes impossible not to decipher others. Solitude grants you the perspective of an observer, while the rest of the world stumbles in distraction. Here lies the irony. The very thing we fear most is the thing we most need. Solitude is not weakness, it is discipline. It is not exile, it is training. And those who learn its lessons emerge not fragile, but unshakable, capable of standing alone, yet also capable of connecting deeply with others. This is why solitude is not a curse, but a gift. It is the gym where the strongest version of your soul is built. One of the greatest transformations solitude brings is the death of dependency. As long as you fear being alone, every bond you form is shadowed by need. You do not love freely. You cling. You do not choose. You beg. You search for someone to fill the emptiness you cannot face within yourself. But when you pass through the fire of solitude, something changes. You realize your own company is enough. You discover that love is not about filling a void, but about sharing what already overflows. Suddenly, relationships are no longer crutches. They are choices. They are not about survival, but about creation. This is why true love cannot be born out of dependency. Dependency breeds anxiety, jealousy, and fear. But solitude purifies love because it removes the chains of need. Only a person who lacks nothing within themselves can offer genuine love. And that love is the rarest thing in the world. Imagine approaching another not with empty hands, but with hands overflowing. Imagine choosing a friend, a partner, not because you cannot bear life without them, but because you want to share the richness you already carry. This is what solitude makes possible. And here lies the deeper truth. Society fears people who master solitude. Why? Because such people are ungovernable. They cannot be manipulated with fear of rejection. They cannot be bought with cheap praise. They are free, untamed, unpredictable. A person who has passed the test of solitude is impossible to enslave. Ask yourself, what would happen if more people discovered this secret? If millions learned to live at peace with themselves, no longer begging for recognition? The system built on dependency would collapse. Because a human being who does not fear being alone is a human being truly free. And so we return to the question we began with. Why is solitude the ultimate test of your life? Because in solitude, everything is decided. When the masks fall, when the lights fade, when the applause stops, you are left with yourself. And in that moment, you meet the truth you cannot escape. For most, solitude feels like a tunnel, dark, unsettling, endless. But if you endure, you find what waits at the end: freedom. Freedom from dependency. Freedom from fear. Freedom from the endless search for approval. Solitude is not punishment. It is purification. It melts away false needs and forges you into someone whole. Think of it as the crucible of emotional maturity. In solitude, need dissolves, intention is purified, and will is tempered. Out of the fire steps a person capable of walking alone, yet equally capable of extending a hand to others, not out of lack, but out of abundance. This is the secret society does not want you to know. A person who has made peace with their solitude cannot be controlled. They are no longer swayed by rejection, bribed by flattery, or enslaved by fear. They have passed the test. And because of that, they are untamable. So I leave you with this question. Do you run from solitude, or are you learning to walk through it? Because the day you make peace with silence, the day your own company becomes enough, is the day you awaken to a power the rest of the world does not even suspect exists: solitude. The enemy you once feared becomes your greatest ally. And in its company, you finally step into the one thing no one can ever take from you, your true freedom.